Anytime you claim that the universe is a certain way, you're making an ontological claim, because ontology is the branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being. Now, ontology is actually really simple. People like complicating ontology for a lot of reasons, but I'm going to make it really simple because this is good information for anyone to know. The first thing is that we'll put things in different categories in order to compare them. And one argument you'll hear a lot is that we can't decide how to categorize things. What categories do we use? How do we know what thing is in what category? The truth is, it doesn't matter. In fact, I'll start off by comparing variables x and y to prove that point. You could replace x with anything in the world and replace y with its opposite. Good and evil, light and dark, peanut butter and jelly. The names given to the categories may be arbitrary constructs, but it makes sense to use things that seem opposite, also known as conjugates or incommensurable. So, peanut butter and jelly is probably not a good example. So, to start off, there are two main ways to explain the relationship between these two kinds of things, x and y. Firstly, you could suggest that x and y are actually related somehow. Maybe they're made of the same thing. In this scenario, you would always see x and y interact with each other in some way. There would never be a situation in which x or y acted independently without some response or reaction from the other one. This relationship is known as monism. Secondly, you could suggest that while there may be a relationship between x and y, they actually exist independently and can do things without involving the other. That would mean that they are separate things and not linked by a common rule or process or material. In this scenario, you would expect to see x or y often doing things without a response or reaction from the other one. This relationship is known as dualism. These two options cover all the bases. Either the categories exist independently, or they are all comprised of a single base thing. But some people say, wait, hold on. Some people might say, well, y doesn't exist at all, only x exists. And some people over here say, wait a minute, x doesn't exist at all, only y exists. So what's the reasoning for these categories? The guy over here says that y doesn't exist because it's actually made up of x, or caused by x. And the guy over here says, well, x doesn't exist because it's actually made up of y, or caused by y. These positions on the side aren't viewed as monism, because this isn't the claim that multiple things are related. This is the claim that a whole category simply doesn't exist. So what are the names of these side positions? First, let's apply categories to replace the variables x and y. Usually the categories used are physical and non-physical. So here's what it looks like now. In the case of these categories being used, the one on the left claims that the non-physical category doesn't exist. This position is physicalism, but it is also widely referred to as materialism. I don't think it matters much which label you use. Everyone knows what you're talking about. The one on the right that claims that the physical category doesn't exist is known as idealism. And so these four main ontological positions have different variations or interpretations by various groups and are called by different names. So, for example, a popular form of idealism in society today is called relativism or postmodernism or general nihilism, and these are taught to college students, mainly in the social sciences. And physicalism or materialism is mainly recognized as the general attitude of the hard sciences. As for dualism, you see a lot of different religions today, like simulation theory, that's a big one, or maybe something like a Scientology, that sort of thing. Basically anything with ghosts. And the more public teachings of most religions, especially the Abrahamic religions, would definitely fall under this category, even though the official doctrine of most major religions leans a lot more towards monism. I recently started a series of videos discussing whether Christianity would actually be considered monism as opposed to dualism. The real monism forms of these religions would be referred to as pantheism or panentheism. Those, I think, actually cover most religions in the world. And then you have panpsychism and all the variations of that. And that concludes the first part of this video, which is mostly strictly informational with a minimal amount of bias. But now I'm going to segue into how we can go about figuring out which one is right, or at least give an educated guess. Because I'm not about absorbing meaningless information and regurgitating it. No way. We're here to discuss some heavy stuff, and we have to think critically. So we have all these variations and different viewpoints, but I think we can all agree that we have to figure out which one of the four is correct before we can get into the specifics. So that whittles it down to four. They're going to go fast. Okay, next to go are physicalism and idealism. These are going down together because really they're two sides of the same coin. Their premise is identical, and so are their arguments, actually. The main claim with physicalism is that you have no thoughts or experiences because your thoughts and experiences are caused by your brain. Your experiences are just an illusion, so that means the illusion is all that you experience. It's basically the ontological extension of indirect realism, which is the statement that your brain produces a model of reality instead of actually perceiving reality. And that itself is agreed upon by most people and is pretty much a scientific fact. However, to take the next step and identify your own consciousness, your own experiences as being an illusion, all the while you are experiencing, is not logical. And we still have to solve the hard problem, which is to show how neurons firing results in experience of experience itself. A strategy used by physicalists to avoid acknowledging the existence of anything non-physical is to fling around the word construct. What this does is shift one's attention from the non-physical thing to the symbol representing the non-physical thing, in a way that makes you think that the non-physical thing is actually just the symbol. For example, in mitosis, in cell division, chromosomes are moved to the center of the cell in a single file line. The name, the symbol given to this line, is the metaphase plate. You could even draw a line through the chromosomes and label the line metaphase plate. Of course, this line you just drew is a construct. There is no actual line drawn on the cell itself. But the line itself is not a construct. You drawing a line there did not cause the chromosomes to line up. The chromosomes don't care what name you give the line. In fact, there will be chromosomes lining up long after you're dead and no longer giving labels to things. This evasive strategy is used for everything involving non-physical things. Another thing physicalists will do is refer to non-physical forces as particles. Some so-called particles have not even been observed or proven to exist as particles, and yet they are labeled particles. Photons are defined as having no mass and lacking the full 3 dimensions, and yet they are still referred to as particles, and not just because that's just an easy way to categorize things. Humanity has gone on a wild goose chase, spending the most amount of money we have ever spent to find particles that are likely not even there. Why? Because of a religious unwillingness to acknowledge basic ontological knowledge. And I say religious unwillingness, meaning religious dogma, because by definition we are experiencing dogma, a doctrine that is unquestionably true, as determined by the established ontological position, physicalism. Okay, now that we've destroyed physicalism, we're going to go right on over to idealism and do the same thing. Now, physicalism is easy. Physicalism is low-hanging fruit. They're not really that fervent. They just don't want to talk about philosophy. I get it. And they don't pretend to be spiritually or morally enlightened. But idealists are a whole other animal. These are the people who will tell you that the tree doesn't make a sound in the woods because there is no tree as long as they're not there perceiving it. And they're really into the whole construct thing. But this time, it's everything around us. Everything's a construct. Gravity, other people's consciousness, morality, you name it. These people believe that they are alone, a sole consciousness in a vast world dreamt up by themselves. They are a god and you are a character in their dream. One strategy used by idealists is to claim that they are merely being skeptical. I am skeptical of gravity. This is very easy to discount. Skepticism is the questioning of one's own beliefs, and if it is authentic, then one searches for evidence to disprove them. Like your average atheist, you'll never see one of these people testing their hypothesis. A common phrase to hear is, "The burden of proof is not on me." Imagine reading that phrase in a scientific study. Yes, the burden of proof is on you, because you are the one making an ontological claim. A common response is, "I don't have any beliefs." Right, so you believe that you don't have any beliefs? Give me a break. This is not skepticism, it is religious dogma, by definition. But even on top of all that, there is a way to prove that your consciousness is not the only thing that exists. You heard right. All we have to do is apply this ontological formula in a different way. Compare the things which can be described versus the things which cannot be described. Why? Describe anything to me. For example, an apple. You will list off its dimensions, its shape, its color, how it tastes. Now, in the same way, describe these attributes. Please describe the color red to me. Ha! You can't! So now, we have two distinct categories, things which can be described and things which cannot be described. Either these things are made of the same thing and are intertwined, or they exist separately and independently of each other. The first truth is that describable things are all made of indescribable things. So the dualist answer is wrong. Secondly, you can't say that describable things don't exist, because only indescribable things exist, because you're denying the existence of your own experience, which goes against the whole point of your ontological claim. So the only correct answer is that they are intertwined. Monism, not idealism. Now, how can you reconcile solipsism? Well, there are parts of your own consciousness you don't understand yourself. How can you say, all there is consciousness, when you can't comprehend even your own consciousness? To think you are that important. This could be thought of as the hard problem of idealism. Can I do that? So, physicalism and idealism are not taken seriously for pretending that entire categories don't exist. So we can strike them off the list. Now we're left with monism and dualism, which historically has been the case. How do we determine which one is true? Well, that's where science comes in, obviously. People say that science is about what can be sensed by our human senses. That is nothing but the exact opposite of the truth. Science exists because our senses suck. Science deals in things which cannot be sensed. We use science to support hypotheses with experimental evidence because we cannot support them with senses alone. I mean, we were splitting atoms before we could even see them. And saying science is incapable of figuring something out is the same as saying you're enlightened to such a level that science could never figure it out. All you have to do is study the physical and deduce its relationship with the non-physical. If the physical is independent from the non-physical, then the universe is dualist. If the physical is connected with the physical, then the universe is monist. Well, it turns out that we've already done this. We've already done this a lot. And it always turns out that the physical is connected with the non-physical. Every time something physical happens, there is a non-physical reaction. Every time something non-physical happens, there is a physical reaction. Now that the others have been eliminated, we're left with monism. The only reason that the established attitude in the hard sciences is closer to physicalism rather than monism is because of an unwillingness to discuss ontology, an unwillingness to acknowledge the objective existence of non-physical things like thoughts, experiences, and even fields and forces. I am not advocating for imaginary, made-up stuff. I am saying that how we look at things is holding us back technologically.